Back in the day, there were at least 5 categories of slaves. You had the debt slaves, you had war captives, you had blood slaves, conjugal slaves, and employee slaves. Now, in Israel, most slaves were debt or employee slaves. Slavery was outlawed in Israel after the return from Babylon. People, however, could continue to work for a family as a servant. In Greece and Rome, by the time we get to Paul, most people were slaves in the sense of employees who needed a job or they needed to pay off a debt. These were contractual agreements. Now, in many cases, if you found a good family to work for, you could choose to stay with that family for the rest of your life. And your descendants, well, they could replace you after you passed away. In other words, the majority of people Paul is speaking to are people who are under a contractual work agreement. Now, we know that about 1/3 of the population were slaves in Rome, and they were often abused both physically, and sexually. They could be raped, whipped, branded, mutilated, or killed. As punishment, a slave could be sold so that he was forever separated from his family. Caesar Augustus crucified a slave who accidentally killed his pet quail. One historian wrote of a slave whose owner's great pleasure was listening to the sweet songs of his slaves being flogged. So, when Paul tells slaves, in effect, be good slaves and you will be rewarded in heaven, critics viciously attacked him. That's just pie in the sky when you die. That's a crucial disregard for the hardships and these poor victims are suffering right now. How dare you promise them a reward in heaven when they die? We need to organize slave protests. Slaves of the world, unite, stand up for your rights. Given what slavery has done to millions of people down through history, how can Paul ask slaves to serve their masters, let alone with a singleness of mind? Because when you are a Christian, everything you do is your witness. This also includes the choices you make while you're a slave. Think about some of the most influential men in the Bible. A number of them were slaves. Joseph, Daniel, Ezra, Naaman's servant girl. Some of the greatest and most influential people in the Bible were once slaves. They literally helped to change the world. Now, how did they manage to do that? They did it because they all made the choice to work for God. Does this make slavery right? Does this mean that God approved of slavery? Most certainly not. No such thing exists in the Bible. What it means is that no matter the situation you find yourself in, work like you work for God, and God will work through you, and He'll work for you. And that was our nugget for today. Please, have a look at your lesson, and we'll see you tomorrow.